Hey guys, it's Madison Gesiotto Gilbert, and we're back with another episode of the Republican Rundown. As always, I'm joined by Tommy Pigott and Schipper, and we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get right into it. Obviously, a big win on Monday for President Trump. Congratulations to our Iowa caucus winner. And now we're just 5 days away from another important election, the New Hampshire primary, the first in the nation primary. As many people out there know, no Republican has ever become our nominee without winning either Iowa or New Hampshire since the inception of the Iowa caucus in 1976. Now, Monday, we had a great turnout. 110,000 people turned out despite frigid temperatures in Iowa. Negative 40 degrees with wind chill, I believe. Keith, you were on the ground. Let people know how that felt.
It was truly awful. It was something I'd never experienced that kind of cold before. It's one of those things where you would go outside and you felt like needles were just like poking you in the face. I made the mistake of forgetting my gloves and then thinking I could buy gloves at the Des Moines airport, and they didn't have any gloves. And then my hands froze for 20 minutes and I was just stuck like this until I could get them to move again. And I think the weirdest part is I could feel like my beard freezing. And it's funny because I was watching the Chiefs game against the Dolphins that weekend, and you saw like Andy Reid with like just his icicle mustache and like just thick ice on it. And I could truly feel myself kind of getting that kind of like frozen beard. It was the most bizarre feeling I'd ever felt. So props to the 110,000 folks that turned out in that weather. I think you truly, truly have to be excited about this election to brave those elements and to drive those roads. Those are elements I hope to not experience again and in the near future, but I'll be in New Hampshire in a couple days, and who knows? It seems that this cold weather is just following me around. I got to D.C. and suddenly it snows here, and I got to go to New Hampshire in a couple of days. It'll probably snow there. So it was rough. It was certainly rough.
Well, it looks like you're taking the cold right with you. A frozen beard isn't one I can relate to, but being from Ohio, we've experienced a couple cold winters in our day in a lot of snowstorms. So shout out to all the Iowans that did get out. Tommy, what were your takeaways from Monday?
Yeah, I thought that was incredible that so many people came out given those conditions. And I think that's such a contrast between Republicans and Democrats, where you have Republicans on the ground in these states, Republicans coming out to vote, and Democrats are running as far away as they can from these voters. They're running as fast as they can from voters. Joe Biden's on vacation more than any president in modern history, while we have Republicans on the ground talking to voters, Republicans coming out to vote. And look at the polls, we see Republicans so enthusiastic for this election. And the majority of Democrats don't want Joe Biden to even be their nominee. So I think that was a huge takeaway from this, the contrast between the enthusiasm on the Republican side, Republicans getting out there talking about these issues, versus Joe Biden, who goes on vacation, doesn't speak to voters, is afraid to take questions, and really a lack of enthusiasm on the Democrat side when it comes to this election.
Yeah, and not only is Joe Biden on vacation, but the Democrats did something quite interesting this year when it came to their election in Iowa. Keith, do you want to speak to a little bit about what went on this year, what they're doing? Obviously, no results coming until Super Tuesday, despite votes already being cast in Iowa. I'd never heard of something like it, but not that surprising, I suppose, following their disaster in 2020.
Well, that, and you have a historically weak president who, let's not forget, lost Iowa. I don't know. We actually don't really know the results in Iowa yet. We're 4 years removed. We still have no idea who actually won for sure. Iowa lost New Hampshire, lost Nevada, finally won in South Carolina. So he had to redo the whole map and the order. And, South Carolina will go first here at the beginning of February. Nevada and New Hampshire are supposed to go at the same time, but New Hampshire, of course, has their first in the nation primary and their laws that say that they have to go first. So they're going to jump the line, and they're being penalized by by the removal of delegates, and it's just a mess. And then Iowa was, of course, upset that they lost their designation of being the first overall. And so they have this kind of weird system where people can start voting now, but they're not going to tell anybody who got the votes until Super Tuesday. It's just a mess. And it's all because this president is so weak that he needs the DNC to do everything that they can, and all these state parties to do whatever they can to help him out. I mean, even in Florida, they're not even putting all the candidates on the ballot there. It truly is chaos in the Democrat Party in their primary. And it's all to save this president who, to be honest, most people want out.
Yeah, it doesn't deserve saving, that's for sure. Main takeaway I would say is Republican Party is better than the Democratic Party right now, and I anticipate will remain so for decades to come following this far left shift we've seen in the Democratic Party. Every single day it seems like they depart farther and farther, not only from the middle, but from common sense. Nothing seems to make sense that they're doing. And you talk about the map, we look across the country, and we talk about banking your vote. This is something obviously we've been bringing up every week because it's so critically important to our victories in November. Tommy, talk a little bit about what updates we have from a national party perspective on the Bank Your Vote initiative now that we're into 2024 and officially starting the election process.
Yeah, well, it's full steam ahead. Like we mentioned last time, we have pages, state-specific pages for all 50 states because each one of those states has different rules when it comes to early voting. We have state teams across the country, and not just in traditional battleground states. We also have them, at least for the presidency, we have them in battleground states for the House and Senate. If you think about California, New York, we have state-specific teams in those states because a lot of those House races are key. We have state-specific teams in Montana, Pennsylvania, Ohio. A lot of state Senate races that we really need to win and that we look forward to winning. We also have that Bank Your Vote initiative there. And it's also that election integrity effort. We're continuing to step in and defend common sense election integrity measures, fight back against the left as they try to undermine our election so that we can have confidence in voting early. So it's that election integrity aspect, these state-specific teams. And when it comes to these primaries, as elections are on the mind in Iowa, New Hampshire, we had the chair in Iowa, for example, talking about Bank Your Vote with young voters, getting out there, talking about Iowa's Bank Your Vote program. Because as elections are on the mind now, as these primaries are on top of mind, people should be making their plan to vote in November. Because if we don't win in November, it doesn't matter who the nominee is. We have to win in November in order to govern. That's the only way we can get these Republican policies enacted.
Yeah, and I keep talking to people so frequently about the fact that we're listening to the concerns of our voters. We're listening to the concerns of people across the country in our party who have said, I don't feel like my vote's protected. And so we can't expect them to get out and vote early if we don't protect their vote. So I think protecting the vote in our election integrity department is critically important. All of the efforts they're making so critically important. We had Gates on back in December talking about much of this. We'll have to have him back for a legal update as well. Keith, what else do you want to add to Bank Your Vote, why it's important, what we're looking at? Also, I'd love to, at some point before the end of the show, maybe we can get Dennis and Chris to pull up one of our state-specific Bank Your Vote website pages so people can take a look at that during the show today, too.
Yeah, absolutely. We should pull it up now because I was part of the reason why I was in Iowa was to launch Bank Your Vote Iowa, and we have all these state-specific websites that have if you go to your state, you can see what the rules are in your state, what the important dates of, say, if there's mail ballots, when do they come out, or if you need to register to vote absentee, when's the deadline, when does early voting start in your state if you have it, when does early voting end, and if you sign up to commit to Bank Your Vote, we'll chase you. We'll make sure that we are updating you constantly, reminding you of when these dates are, and it's really, really important and cool that we have these tools for all 50 states. And in Iowa, we did a panel with Chairman Kaufman of the Iowa Republican Party, Chairman McDaniel, Congressman Zach Nunn, and then we had actually some members of young voters part of it that were part of the local university college Republicans. They came and they talked about how important it is for young voters to take advantage of Bank Your Vote because, they got a lot when it comes to school or, they're very transient or they may go to school in one state, but they're actually residents in another state, and just understanding exactly how you can vote, when you can vote, all that kind of stuff is all wrapped into one, and it's all individualized for where folks live. So it's very, very cool. Go to your state Bank Your Vote site. You can find them all if you just go to bankyourvote.com. And we need folks to sign up because at the end of the day, if you're a dependable Republican, we need you to turn out as early as possible because it actually saves us a lot of money in the long run because then we can spend more wisely on making sure that we're chasing folks who may not want to vote or aren't unsure if they want to vote or need just a little extra love to get to turn in their ballots. We need to make sure that we have those resources. And so if we're spending that money chasing folks that are going to vote no matter what, it really ties our hands. So go to bankyourvote.com, go to your state Bank Your Vote website, sign up, get the text alerts, all that kind of stuff to make sure that you understand what days are coming up. And we need folks to do this now because we are just a few months away. We are truly in the middle of the election now. The first contest is behind us. The second one's coming up this is the march to November. So please, please, please sign up to bank your vote and to vote early and commit to vote early at bankyourvote.com.
And the chairwoman was on Fox this week talking about, how important it is that we have the resources to target independents, that we are winning independents because there are more independents in this country than ever before. More people have left both parties and consider themselves to be independents, and we need to win them if we want to see wins in places we didn't see them in 2022. So my other question to you, Keith, is what is your message as communications director for the party? What is your message to those Republicans out there, like, quite frankly, myself in the past, who say, I don't like early voting. I don't support the way things have changed. I want to vote on election day. Obviously, I've shifted my view on that, and I now vote early. But a lot of people out there, I think, still hold that same sentiment. There is still that stigma in the Republican Party. How do we break that?
Yeah, look, we get it. We are fighting bad laws in courts. We're defending good laws in courts. Our Protect the Vote operation is ensuring that we have safe, fair, honest elections. But at the end of the day, we have to play with the rules of the game. And if we choose to not play by those rules and put ourselves at a disadvantage and try to make it so that we all have to catch up and do all our voting on just that one day, while Democrats have up to sometimes 45 days to run up a big lead, we're going to lose. It's like what the chairwoman says. You can't win a game scoring only in the fourth quarter. And I know that as a University of Washington fan, like, we allowed Michigan to take this big lead, and then we couldn't catch it back up. We could not close the deal. You cannot allow the Democrats to score points for three quarters and hold on until and Republicans holding on until they put on points until the fourth quarter. We need
and unfortunately, on Monday, my Steelers experienced the same fate in Buffalo against the Bills, starting off very, very slowly, coming back, but not able to make up that deficit. So we see it in sports and we see it in politics as well. 2022, another great example of that. Races across the country, like my own, that would have had wildly different results if we had a significant portion of that early vote that we simply got crushed on compared to the Democrats. And so this is going to be our year in which we turn that around. And I believe that. Tommy, are you on the same page as us? And what else are you seeing and hearing out there coming out of Iowa? I know a lot of people talked about immigration and the border.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's really important to vote early. I mean, just talking about the resources, you guys are hitting on those key points. That's one of the more compelling arguments I've heard from people that are skeptical, that say, oh, I'm going to vote on election day. Why does it matter if I vote early? It's because of those resources that we no longer have to spend targeting those voters that have already voted, and that we can use those resources elsewhere. And it's so important to vote because we can't afford to have Joe Biden have 4 more years. I mean, and one of the key examples of that is the border crisis. There's actually 2 things from Iowa I think are worth talking about. One of them is the fact that mainstream media is completely ignoring the border crisis, refusing to talk about it, and honestly is censoring Republicans that want to talk about it. I think we actually have an example of this from a recent interview of yours, Madison, actually.
While Trump was giving his victory speech in Iowa last night, the media seemed to cut away when he started bringing up the border crisis. Watch this.
We're going to seal up the border. We have an invasion of millions and millions of people that are coming into our country. I can't imagine why they think that's a good thing.
Donald Trump declaring victory with a historically strong showing in the Iowa caucuses. Here he is right now under my voice. You hear him repeating his anti-immigrant rhetoric.
The projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. We will let you know if there's any news made in that speech. There is a reason that we and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump.
And what I found so outrageous, maybe ironic is the word, that they are censoring Republicans talking about the border, is that they have routinely pushed fake Democrat stories on the border since Joe Biden took office, since before Joe Biden took office. It's clearly politically driven, clearly biased. Madison, what were your thoughts when you heard these examples of the mainstream media refusing to cover President Trump talking about the border?
I wasn't surprised. It's not the only thing that they do. It's not the only thing they don't want to talk about. But from a journalistic perspective, I still find it to be very disappointing when you think about what is the role of a journalist, what is the role of the media, right? They're supposed to be, providing accurate information, providing the news to the people who tune into their shows. And I can't help but think that what's more relevant to talk about on the night of the Iowa caucus, especially, than the issue that Iowans said was most important to them, coming from the mouth of the very successful winner who won by 50 plus percentage points. I don't care whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, whether it's someone they like or don't like. That's something that's newsworthy, and that's something that should have been covered, and definitely impacting our country and states and cities across the country every single day. So very, very disappointed in where we've come as a country when it comes to our mainstream media. We saw this start to take effect really in 2017, but it's only gotten worse since then. And I don't know how we really turn this around from a media perspective at this point.
Yeah, what makes it especially newsworthy, I think, as well, is that it was one of the top issues that Iowans voted on when they took their entrance polls. The border was listed right up there above the economy even. And if you look across the country, border, not just Republicans, Democrats and independents, you see a huge uptick in the importance of this border crisis. I mean, Keith, when you see the mainstream media trying to shift the narrative away from this, what's your reaction to seeing the media kind of, again, try to play cover for Joe Biden in this crisis?
Yeah, I mean, that's just par for the course. Take Tapper, for instance. I'm not surprised that Tapper didn't want to talk about it, but I'm also not surprised that nobody wanted to watch Tapper. I mean, I think I saw the ratings, less than 700,000 people watch CNN's coverage of the caucus. Meanwhile, Fox, of course, cleaned up because Fox was carrying everything, was talking about the issues that were motivating folks. And so, if they don't want to talk about it, perhaps they should reevaluate what people are really concerned about. Maybe they can start with seeing, what's top of mind for the mayor of New York and the mayor of Chicago. It seems that they really are paying attention and very concerned about this border crisis. So, the media, unfortunately, they have their own agenda when it comes to these things. They're clearly frustrated. I mean, you could hear the tone in Tapper's voice and the tone in Maddow's voice. They're very frustrated that voters are concerned about what they're concerned about. And perhaps they should do more listening and less talking because they're losing eyeballs as a result of their refusal to cover the things that are top of mind for voters.
You can't blame. Yeah,
and they all live in their insulated worlds, Tommy. It's very similar to what we saw in 2016. It's very similar to what we continue to see when it comes to the Second Amendment. Nobody wants people in this country to be able to protect themselves and their families, but these people have private security. You see it with Hillary Clinton. You see it with many people in the mainstream media. And Monday night, when you watch a lot of the coverage, it did feel very reminiscent of election night in 2016. November 8th, 2016, I always remember the faces on some of those Democrat so-called journalists when President Trump did win. And I think it's very similar to that.
Yeah, and again, the contrast between a media that is censoring Republicans and literally taking fake talking points from this White House as fact. And I think a great example of that was while all eyes were on Iowa, Joe Biden was finally asked if he views the border crisis as a crisis. And we have a clip of his response here, if we can play that.
Mr. President, would you call the situation on the southern border a crisis?
No. So a bit tough to hear there, but in case you didn't, Joe Biden was asked, is the border crisis a crisis? And he said, no. Which when I heard that, it's absurd because everyone across the board, except for apparently Joe Biden in his administration, admits this is a crisis with the most illegal border crossings in U.S. history, 1.7 million gotaways, fentanyl pouring over the border. Keith, you mentioned Democrat mayors. I mean, how can he sit there and say it's not a crisis when all the evidence points the other direction? And I guarantee you the mainstream media is covering those comments without censoring it and probably accepting it as verbatim. I mean, it's such a contrast between Republicans and Democrats on this issue especially. Keith, when you see Joe Biden refusing to recognize that it's a crisis, what do you think?
Perhaps he has a different definition of crisis, like Bill Clinton has a different definition of the word "is." Because by all means, when you look at the numbers, it's clearly a crisis. Democrat mayors think it's a crisis. It seems that more and more Democrats, that are in swing districts, are finding it to be a crisis. But Joe Biden isn't. And so the only thing that could possibly make sense is that he has completely redefined the word to fit his narrative. Because I have not talked to a single person who has not thought that this is a crisis at the border. And so, par for the course. It's why why Mayorkas is undergoing possible impeachment. This administration just doesn't care. They just don't care. That's just what it's become very clear for a very long time. They do not care about this crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked about this in Madison Minute yesterday, Tommy. 18% of people in this country approve of Biden on the border, and that's the lowest we've seen of any president in 20 years.
And that's just crazy. I mean, it's also, you have Joe Biden, who is redefining the crisis not as a crisis, called Afghanistan, the withdrawal in Afghanistan, called that successful. He's calling Bidenomics, saying it's working. I mean, so those three things right there, redefining the word working, redefining the word successful, redefining the word crisis. If that's his message going into 2024, which it seems to be, it seems like a losing message to me, because the American people can see with their own eyes what's happening with the economy, with the border. I mean, it seems like he's so divorced from reality. Madison, what do you think when you think the Biden administration redefining all of these words to try to fit their narrative as if that's going to solve people's problems?
Yeah, I think we just have to keep pushing the real facts. We have to make sure that we're connecting with voters on the real solutions that we have. When people are upset about something, they want to hear about how it can get better. And I think as Republicans, as a party, we have that vision and we have the policies and the facts to back it up that can change things in the other direction. Obviously, we've had an immigration crisis in this country for many, many years. But without securing the border, we can't even begin to address that immigration crisis. We can't even begin, as I've spoken before on Republican Rundown, to address the court backlog. We can't begin to address any of these problems related to immigration without first securing the border. We can't have 8.5 million people coming across the border over the next 3 years, as we've seen the past 3 years, and expect to be successful on this issue. I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. This is a crisis, and we have to come together and we have to fix it. And Biden and his administration just don't seem interested in doing that. So it's going to be upon us to win in November, win the presidency, hopefully pick up some more House seats, take back the Senate, and start to get to work on this issue that matters to people and that's impacting people's lives in this country in so many ways.
Yeah, and the goal of this administration to say that their border plan is working, when in April 2021, Joe Biden said that they had gotten control of the border crisis. 2 years ago. I mean, it's absurd, and he still is refusing to call it a crisis. And contrasting that with House Republicans passing border security legislation 253 days ago, that Joe Biden could solve this crisis tomorrow if he took up. It's absolutely absurd what he's saying. Keith, do you think the American people are seeing through what Joe Biden's saying, or do you think, how do you view the American people on this border crisis and when Joe Biden continues to deny reality?
I mean, yes, obviously the people are seeing it. I mean, look at his approval ratings seem to have an anchor tied around it and are sinking faster than we can even keep our eyes on. I mean, it's so bad that every time there's a new poll that comes out, people are like, this has to be an outlier. And then another poll comes out that shows it even worse. And we get into this media game of just not wanting to believe that this president could be so disliked. But it's because of things like the border. It's because this border crisis is doing what is really emphasizing what Republicans have always said, is that every community is a border community. And it's not just those on, the actual border in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. It's every community. And now every community is really feeling these impacts and they're tired of it. And then you add in the fact that it costs so much to provide for your family, and then the world's less safe. It's just this president is just completely disliked because of all these failures after failures after failures.
And I think also, Tommy, you see now so many people that are getting news online, not just Gen Z, but people in general who are online, seeing videos coming out from citizen journalists at the border on X, Elon Musk obviously pushing a lot of this. And you see those videos coming out where people are starting to ask questions. They're starting to say, hey, this is what the administration, or this is what the mainstream media is telling me, but this is what I'm seeing online. They're saying, oh, this is all families, but I'm seeing a lot of single military-aged men. Why is that? What's going on? They're starting to ask these critical questions about what's really going on at the border. And I find that to be very valuable.
Yeah, and there was one other sort of area that I thought over the weekend, while everyone was focused on Iowa, that Joe Biden sort of showed, again, that he's disconnected from reality. And that's his message to Iran. If we could play the clip of Joe Biden on that, please.
I've already delivered the message to Iran. They know not to do anything.
So again, for those that had trouble hearing that, he says, I've already delivered that message to Iran when asked about military action Iran might take against U.S. troops. Of course, we saw in the Middle East that Iran-backed proxies have been attacking U.S. troops hundreds of times since October. Iran had a major escalation. Joe Biden called himself an expert in foreign policy when running in 2020. Madison, would you view Joe Biden as an expert on foreign policy?
Absolutely not. He's been a failure on foreign policy. He's on the wrong side of pretty much every decision he's ever made as president and in things he was involved in as vice president. He's emboldened Iran as president. He did the same thing as vice president. And we've seen that time and time again through his bad decisions. On top of that, I don't think Iran is scared of Joe Biden. My dog wouldn't even be scared of Joe Biden. Nobody is deterred by anything he's said or done. And that's the reason why we see what's going on internationally. There's no peace in the world because no one fears this nation right now. We have weak leadership at the top, and it makes me feel very unsafe every single night when I think about it.
Yeah, Keith, to me, it seems like it would be common sense for Joe Biden to take steps to stop the flow of money to Iran after we saw him opening up billions of dollars, whether that's through oil sales or sanctions. Wouldn't it be common sense for him just to stop that flow of money, given what Iran is doing?
Common sense is another one of those words I don't think Biden has the same definition of that we do. But, with getting to something that Madison said, Robert Gates literally, former secretary under Obama, literally said that Joe Biden has been wrong on every major foreign policy decision in his career. And we're seeing it really come to fruition, how poorly he is when it comes to foreign policy in this short term that Biden has been in office, whether it be the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, war breaking out in Europe, war breaking out in the Middle East, and now an emboldened Iran. This president has forever been notorious for being a failure, in affairs abroad. And now it's to the point where he is putting us in danger and making our national security, putting it at risk. So, this president, again, it's just one of many, many reasons why his approval ratings continue to be in the toilet and are getting worse and worse day by day.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many conflicts. Madison, you talked about wars all over the place. We had peace before Joe Biden took office. We have war after. That's one of the worst indictments I think you can make of his foreign policy. And one of the reasons we could not afford 4 more years of Joe Biden, that's why people have to go to bankyourvote.com while elections are on the mind. Make your plan to vote now. Make that plan to vote early. Be part of joining the team that beats Biden in November. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. This has been the Republican Rundown. We'll be back next week.